I still remember the exact moment I realized something had shifted. It wasn't when the email about adjusted bonuses hit my inbox. That kind of thing had happened before. Budgets tighten, targets change, executives discover new definitions of the word fair. I had learned over 15 years in corporate offices to read those messages without reacting. It was the laugh. We were in a glass-walled conference room on the 22nd floor, late on a Friday afternoon. End of quarter wrap-up. Someone had ordered food that nobody touched. The mood was supposed to be light. My boss leaned back in his chair, hands behind his head, going down the list of names and numbers like it was a casual game. When he got to me, he paused. "0 this quarter," he said, smiling. Then he laughed, not nervously, not awkwardly. A real laugh. "Guess not everyone pulls their weight," he added, glancing around the table. A few people smiled. One person looked down at their notebook. Nobody said anything. I felt my face heat up, but I kept my expression neutral. Years of experience had taught me that any visible reaction would only make it worse. I nodded once, as if this was a perfectly reasonable outcome. He wasn't finished. "You'll get there someday," he said, still grinning. "Maybe next year." That was it. He moved on to the next name. The meeting ended 5 minutes later with polite applause and chairs scraping against the floor. On the elevator ride down, nobody spoke to me. Not because they didn't notice what happened, but because they did. That night, I sat in my car longer than usual before driving home. I wasn't angry yet. Anger comes later. First comes confusion. You replay conversations. You ask yourself if you missed something obvious. I had led 2 major initiatives that year. Both delivered early. Both saved money. Both were now quietly being credited to team effort in upper management decks. At home, my wife asked how work went. I told her it was fine. I wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. The next Monday, I requested a one-on-one. My boss didn't seem surprised. He waved me into his office like this was routine. Same relaxed posture. Same half smile. "I just wanted to understand the reasoning," I said calmly. "My performance reviews have been solid. The metrics." He cut me off with a small chuckle. "Listen," he said, leaning forward. "You do good work. Nobody's denying that. But bonuses aren't just about output. They're about visibility, presence, alignment." Alignment, that word again. "So what should I be doing differently?" I asked. He shrugged. "Hard to say. Maybe be more proactive, less rigid." I waited for specifics. They didn't come. As I stood to leave, he added almost casually, "Don't take it personally. These things happen." That's when the second shift occurred. I realized this wasn't about performance. It was about narrative. Somewhere along the line, I had stopped fitting into the story he was telling upstairs. And once that happens, logic no longer protects you. Over the next few days, small things started to stand out. My access to certain dashboards was delayed. Not denied, just pending. Emails I used to be copied on arrived without my name. A project I had designed was reassigned for streamlining, with me kept on as support. None of it was dramatic enough to confront. All of it was intentional. I began taking notes, not out of paranoia, but clarity. Dates, times, decisions that contradicted prior approvals, requests that came verbally instead of in writing. I saved calendar invites. I archived versions of documents before and after edits. I wasn't plotting revenge, not yet. I was trying to understand the shape of the room I was standing in. 2 weeks later, Finance sent out a routine notice about upcoming access audits, standard procedure, badge reviews, system permissions, compliance housekeeping. Most people skimmed it. I didn't. I remembered something my boss had said in passing months earlier, how annoying audits were, how they slowed things down, how he had ways around the noise. At the time, it sounded like bravado. Now it sounded like a loose thread. That night, I stayed late. Not to work harder, to look closer. I didn't break rules. I didn't access anything I wasn't authorized to see. I reviewed my own project logs, approval chains, expense justifications, and for the first time, I noticed how often my boss's name appeared on decisions he never remembered making. Sign-offs without attachments, overrides without follow-ups, small exceptions stacked quietly on top of each other. It wasn't illegal, not on its own, but it was fragile. As I shut down my computer, the office nearly empty around me, a strange calm settled in. The embarrassment from that meeting no longer burned. In its place was something colder and more focused. I finally understood the rules of the game I was in. And I knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened next wasn't going to be loud, but it was going to be precise. By the second week after the bonus meeting, the pattern stopped being subtle. Requests that used to come through email started arriving as quick desk-side conversations. "No need to loop everyone in," my boss would say, tapping the edge of my monitor. "We're aligned." When I followed up with a summary email anyway, he'd reply with a thumbs-up emoji and no confirmation. No paper trail, no ownership. I adjusted. I began sending recap emails that ended with a simple line. "Please confirm if this reflects your direction." Most went unanswered. A few came back with vague acknowledgments, none with objections. It wasn't defiance, it was insurance. The next irritation came from finance. A reimbursement I'd approved dozens of times before bounced back with a note. "Missing executive sign-off." I forwarded it to my boss. He replied within minutes, surprisingly fast, telling me to handle it locally and not escalate. I asked who should sign. He said he would circle back. He didn't. 2 days later, finance followed up again, CCing compliance this time. The tone had shifted, still polite, sharper edges. In the hallway, my boss laughed it off. "They're getting jumpy because of the audit," he said. "Don't let it slow you down." That was the phrase he used whenever something should have slowed us down. At lunch, a colleague pulled me aside. Someone I trusted, not a friend, but careful and observant. She lowered her voice and asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine. She hesitated, then said she'd heard my bonus situation had been a signal. "A signal for what?" I asked. She shrugged. "That you're not protected." That night I went back through the previous quarter's approvals, not out of suspicion, out of context. I mapped timelines. Who requested what? Who approved? Who implemented? I noticed that exceptions clustered around end-of-day approvals and verbal go-aheads. The same phrases repeated. Urgent. Client-facing. Temporary. Temporary things have a way of becoming permanent. A calendar invite popped up for a leadership sync I was supposed to attend. 10 minutes before it started, it disappeared. No explanation. I asked my boss if it was rescheduled. He said it was exec only now and I shouldn't worry. I worried. Because 2 days later, a directive came down changing a control I had originally built. A safeguard. It was framed as an optimization. The change increased throughput, but removed a check that required documented justification. The owner on the change request wasn't me. It wasn't finance. It was my boss. I replied with a question, neutral, professional. "Can you confirm the risk acceptance for this change and who is accountable?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stopped by my desk and smiled. "You're overthinking it," he said. "Trust me." I trusted the process, not him. I sent the question again, this time to the shared channel, worded even more carefully. Still no reply. The change went live that evening, and then something else happened. An automated alert I'd configured months earlier fired. It wasn't meant to catch wrongdoing, just anomalies. Volume without documentation. Velocity without justification. It triggered once, then twice, then again. I didn't raise it. I logged it. On Friday, my boss gathered the team and praised decisive leadership for pushing through blockers. He joked about how some people hide behind policy. His eyes met mine for half a second, long enough to be intentional. People laughed. I didn't. After the meeting, he sent me a message. "Let's keep things moving. No surprises." I replied, "Agreed." That weekend, I didn't think about work, or at least I tried not to. But on Sunday night, as I packed my bag, My phone buzzed with a notification from finance, a system-generated reminder about pending documentation, this time flagged as high priority. The owner listed wasn't me. It was him. I slept fine that night, not because I felt safe, but because I finally understood the direction of the current. On Monday morning, as I badged into the building, I noticed a small line had been added to the audit notice pinned near reception. An update, a date, a time. I realized then that whatever he thought he was managing had already moved beyond his reach. The third week was when the pressure stopped coming from above and started coming from the sides. People I'd worked with for years grew careful around me. Conversations cut short when someone approached. A few meetings were rescheduled without explanation, not canceled, just shifted. It was the corporate version of weather changing. You don't see the storm yet, but the air feels wrong. On Tuesday morning, finance requested a walkthrough. Not a confrontation, a walkthrough. They wanted me to explain the original structure of the controls I'd built and when certain exceptions were introduced. The invite was framed as routine, but the attendee list told a different story. Finance, internal audit, compliance, no executives, no my boss. I prepared the way I always did, chronologically. I showed them the baseline design, the intent, the approvals required. Then I showed the revisions. Not opinions, just versions, dates, names. I answered questions precisely and only what was asked. When they inquired about verbal approvals, I explained the norm and where it diverged. One of the auditors nodded slowly, as if something had clicked into place. At the end, they thanked me and said they might have follow-ups. I asked if they needed anything else from me. They said no. That should have reassured me. It didn't. An hour later, my boss called. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't joke. He asked why finance was digging around my work. I told him they requested a walkthrough, and I provided it. That was all. You could have looped me in, he said. They didn't ask me to, I replied. Silence stretched between us. Then he exhaled. Be careful, he said. This kind of thing can backfire. That was the first time he'd sounded unsure. By Thursday, the effects were visible. A purchase request he'd fast-tracked was put on hold. Access to one of his dashboards returned an error. His assistant emailed IT and got a generic response about temporary restrictions during audit. At lunch, I overheard two directors whispering about delays, about finance, locking things down, about nobody being able to get answers. That afternoon, compliance sent a company-wide note reminding leadership that verbal approvals did not supersede documented controls. It wasn't accusatory. It was surgical. My boss didn't come by my desk again that day. Instead, I received a calendar invite for Friday morning. Process review, mandatory. His name was on it. Mine was not. But the meeting description referenced systems I owned. I prepared anyway. Friday morning, I walked in early. The conference room lights were on. Inside were two people from finance, one from compliance, and an HR partner I recognized but had never spoken to. My boss arrived last. He tried to smile. It didn't quite land. The finance lead opened with numbers. Small discrepancies, repeated patterns, exceptions without documentation. Then she turned the screen toward him and asked one question. Can you walk us through why these controls were overridden? He began confidently. Urgent needs, client pressure, strategic discretion, the usual phrases. Halfway through, she stopped him. Do you have written approval for any of these? He hesitated. Not in front of me. She nodded and moved on. Compliance asked about risk acceptance. HR asked about delegation. Each question narrowed the space he had to maneuver. I wasn't asked to speak. I wasn't looked at. I was there as context, not subject. Then came the moment that shifted everything. The finance lead mentioned the upcoming access freeze tied to unresolved audit items. It was described as standard, automatic, not punitive. My boss laughed, out of reflex, I think, and said, That won't apply to me. The room went quiet. She met his eyes. It already does. He checked his badge on the table in front of him, turned it over, tried it against the reader by the door. Red light. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked small. The meeting ended without drama. No accusations, no raised voices, just action items and follow-ups. As we filed out, HR asked him to stay behind. No one asked me to. I went back to my desk and continued working. That afternoon, an all-hands email went out about temporary leadership coverage in our department. No names, no explanations. People didn't laugh anymore. As I shut down my computer that evening, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief. Something closer to clarity. I hadn't won anything, but I hadn't lost myself either, and for the first time in weeks, I could finally see where this was going. The building felt different the following Monday. Quieter. Not in a dramatic way, no hushed voices or emergency meetings, but in the way systems feel when someone important has been removed and everything is recalibrating around the absence. Doors opened slower. Approvals took longer. People double-checked who was copied before hitting send. My boss didn't come in. No out-of-office reply. No explanation. His name was still on the org chart, but in gray. Temporary. Pending. By mid-morning, finance issued a formal notice. Certain approvals would be rerouted until further review. The language was neutral, but the effect was immediate. Projects stalled. Vendors asked questions. One escalated, asking why a directive signed weeks ago was now considered invalid. Compliance answered that one. In writing. Around noon, HR scheduled short one-on-ones with team leads. 15 minutes each. Structured, polite. I was last on the list. When I sat down, the HR partner thanked me for my cooperation and asked if I felt comfortable continuing to own the systems. During the transition, I said yes. She nodded and reminded me not to discuss the review with colleagues. I agreed. There was nothing to discuss anyway. The facts were doing their work on their own. That afternoon, my boss tried to message me. Just a single line. Can we talk? I didn't ignore it. I replied that I was in meetings and asked him to coordinate through HR, given the ongoing review. It was the most professional sentence I'd written in weeks. It was also the most final. He didn't respond. Instead, a company-wide alert went out. Badge access disruptions in certain departments were expected to continue through the end of the week. He'd apologized for the inconvenience. People understood what it meant. On Wednesday, finance froze a set of transactions tied to the overrides I'd logged. Not as punishment, as containment. The amounts weren't catastrophic, but the timing was brutal. Quarter end, leadership visibility, external scrutiny. Executives started asking questions. By Thursday, someone from legal joined the review calls, not to threaten, to observe. That alone told everyone how serious it had become. Late that afternoon, I ran into my boss in the lobby. He looked exhausted, no jacket, badge clipped to his belt instead of his jacket, an old habit from before he'd stopped worrying about access. He tried to joke, said audits always get messy, said things would blow over. I listened, then I said nothing. He watched my face for a reaction that didn't come, and in that moment, I think he realized something important. This wasn't personal. It was procedural, and procedures don't negotiate. The next morning, an email landed in my inbox from finance confirming that the systems I'd built would be restored to their original control state. No exceptions, no verbal workarounds, pending leadership decisions. I acknowledged it. That was all. An hour later, HR sent a separate message. My boss was on administrative leave, effective immediately. Access suspended. Responsibilities reassigned. No explanation, no farewell. Just silence, the kind that means something irreversible has happened. As the day wound down, I took a walk outside the building. The air was sharp and clear. For weeks, I'd carried a low, constant tension, bracing for impact that never quite arrived. Now it eased, replaced by something steadier. This wasn't chaos. it was consequence. And for the first time since that laugh in the conference room, I felt the balance settle back where it belonged. The next Monday, my badge worked, like it always had. That detail mattered more than I expected, not because I was afraid it wouldn't, but because it confirmed something quietly, without ceremony. The system recognized me. The process held. No announcement was made about my boss. There never is in situations like that. His name disappeared from meeting invites. His office was cleared after hours. A temporary director took over with instructions to stabilize operations and restore trust with finance. Work resumed. Vendors got answers. Approvals followed the documented path again. The alerts stopped firing, not because I disabled them, but because there was nothing left to catch. A week later, my new manager asked to meet, not for performance, for context. He wanted to understand what had happened without gossip or spin. I told him exactly what I'd told finance and compliance weeks earlier. No embellishment, no moral framing. At the end, he nodded once and said, "You handled that the right way." That was the only acknowledgement I needed. When bonus season came around again, my name was back on the list. The number wasn't life-changing, but it was correct. More importantly, it was quiet. No jokes, no speeches, just a line item processed on time. One afternoon, as I was packing up, a colleague stopped by my desk, the same one who had warned me months earlier that I wasn't protected. She smiled, then said, "You know, people noticed." I asked what she meant. "That you didn't flinch?" she said. "You didn't panic. You didn't burn bridges." She paused. "That's rare." On my drive home, I thought about that first meeting. The laugh. The clinking glasses. How small it had made me feel in a room full of people who pretended not to see. I hadn't won by outsmarting anyone. I hadn't set traps or waited for revenge. I just stopped absorbing damage that wasn't mine and let the structure do what it was designed to do. The truth is, when my bonus was cut, I thought I'd been sidelined. I hadn't. I'd been given a clear view of who was standing on ground that couldn't hold them. And when finance froze his badge, it wasn't karma, it was gravity.